for not the first time, I feel incredibly thankful that I am not on a mountain in the middle of nowhere facing potential death with a whole bunch of my compatriots. Last night I finished the book Into Thin Air, which is about a journey to Everest that ends up going very wrong. It starts off, it is a tale of a journalist who, oh, sweetie, a journalist who his whole life he loved mountaineering, and he's specifically been in love with Mount Everest and wanting to be one of the people to climb Everest. And he's done other trips. He's been on other mountains. He's even done some very difficult ice climbing, altitude climbing. He has never done Everest, and he knows that it's a very different climb than what he's been used to, but he still wants to try it because it's kind of his childhood dream, and he wants to, fulfill the childhood dream of being part of the club of the people who end up doing Everest. He is very excited when his journal wants him to go cover an Everest climb with a very famous mountaineer. And I'm not going to use any names because I literally cannot remember names for the life of me, but read the book, it's really good. Anyway, he goes on this trip, but originally he was supposed to just cover it from base camp. I'm assuming that most people have a little bit of an understanding of Everest. There's many different camps on the way. Base camp is kind of where you tend to start from, although it's like a journey to get to base camp. In their case, they took a helicopter to get to base camp, but there's also a hike that a lot of people do. I suspect there's probably some sort of ranking in terms of what people assume like the correct way to climb Mount Everest is, but this was for a journalist, this was for a paper, so it wasn't like the craziest professional climb. Not that it wasn't professional, but it was with a company, and the whole point of the article was supposed to be for like the commercialization of Everest climbing and the different groups that take clients up the mountain and how it's made climbing the mountain easier in general. And it's kind of supposed to be a discussion of that. So the fact that they took the more commercial route via helicopter with this climbing company, it felt very pertinent to the article development. In terms of, I'm sorry, I'm covered in cat hair now. If she is shedding, you are so sheddy. When they get to base camp, already things seem to be a little bit weird, just because there's a bunch of people there already. There's, I think, like 5 other groups that are kind of climbing around the same time. 2 of the other ones, a South African group, and I think it's a Taiwanese group, are the other ones that are mentioned. And then there's also another, I think it's also led by either an American or an Australian, but there's 2 of them kind of not competing, but the 2 guides have a history where they kind of have competing businesses, but they seem to be on good terms, and honestly both of them are really chill, so neither of them are really angry about being in the same place at the same time, and they'd crossed paths before. It's just kind of the fact that the journalist was originally supposed to go with the other group because he was friends with the guy, but then the newspaper set him with this other guy, the competitor, and so he was worried that the guy he was originally supposed to go with, who he was friends with, would be mad at him, but honestly he wasn't. Like, he was just happy that they were on Everest together, like having a good time, gonna climb the mountain. And so they, oh my goodness, my iPad's dying. I have to do it this way because my camera on the front of my phone is broken because I've dropped my phone so many times that my screen protector is totally messed up. It'll just look like I have a halo if I try to do it face the other way. But the book starts off with his preparation for the trip, the training that he does, talking to his wife, but then also a summary of Everest history. and kind of who's climbed it before, how the mountain was discovered, how it was named, the people surrounding the mountain, major figures in the mountain's history, like really everything you could possibly imagine from the history of Everest when you're thinking about climbing, like knowing everything that has happened, could possibly happen. Obviously, he's been obsessed with Everest for a very long time, so it's kind of, he already had a basis in it, but he was trying to prepare more for the trip that they would take. I'd say the story starts off, I was talking to my partner because he'd read this book previously, and he thought that the beginning was really slow. I thought it was necessary because, I mean, while most people reading the book do know about Everest and like have an understanding of Everest, I also feel like a lot of the conversations around Sherpas and the surrounding community that supports Everest, and also the geopolitical conflict between China and India, and who has what permissions to go up the mountain, is really interesting. Also kind of talking about the rituals that you have to go to be able to climb Everest. They're Buddhist, and so it's kind of like you have to go through these very sacred ritual practices where you get blessed so that you're allowed to set foot on Everest. Anyway, it's the religion, the community, it all felt very necessary to kind of set up this this really intense climb. Once they're at base camp, besides the quantity of people, they get shacked in this really weird, I think it was at base camp, they get put in this like cabin with a whole bunch of other people. It's like a lodge, but they're burning yak poop, and it's really disgusting. Like, people are getting sick, people are having to go outside because it smells so bad. There's a description of the bathroom being disgusting, actually so disgusting that people are going to the bathroom outside of the bathroom and just on the ground, and people are getting horribly ill because of these conditions. I think this was in the 1960s, and so while people had been climbing Everest for a while, I think the first climb of Everest in the book, it said, was after World War II, so probably around 1920. So they'd probably been climbing Everest for like 40 years by the time this book was written, or the events of this book take place. But still, they had not really thought about the environmental impact of having so many people on Everest, or if they had thought about it, there wasn't the infrastructure in place to be able to deal with it and to take care of the surroundings. So everyone's getting sick, and they're like, literally, we are all going to Camp 1, even if people are not feeling well, because they don't want to stay behind. They do not want to stay another day in these horrible lodging conditions. So they're like, we'll just make it up to Camp 1 and then, you know, go from there. See how everyone does. So they get to Camp 1, and everything's pretty fine. The journalist, who, by the way, I hate. I mean, his wife literally married him because she thought that he was done with climbing, and then he's like, oh, I'm just gonna go to Everest. No, don't worry, I'm just gonna be in base camp. Oh, you know, maybe I'll go a little bit further, whatever. Like, she's literally at home, like, praying that he does not die, and this man is doing everything he can to get himself killed. Like, it's so frustrating. Anyway, all the other guys on the trip are worse than him, which is another thing that my partner and I were talking about. It's actually so funny because you start hating him, and then you meet the other people, and they're like so selfish. Like, one of the guys literally has like a pregnant wife who's like 6 months pregnant. It's insane. And he's just like continuing on. Anyway, tragic, really tragic what happens to him. Anyway, Camp 1, everyone's fine. He's getting the journalist, the main guy, is getting a little bit altitude sick, but that's to be expected. They're all adjusting. They're all making sure that they can make it up the mountain. Anyway, it's just, he essentially, I'm just gonna summarize it. He essentially makes it to the top of Everest perfectly fine. Like, he's good. He, you know, by the end of it, he's kind of running out of oxygen. He's kind of freaking out a little bit, and he realizes that he's only at the halfway point, because once you get to the top, there's all the way down, and oftentimes the way down is way more treacherous than the way up because of the way that you're facing, gravity, challenging climbing conditions, and also the concern about weather. I'm skipping over a bunch because really I do just want you to read the book, and like, what's the point of me relaying all the information? But what happens when they get to the top is that things start to go wrong. One of the guys had like some sort of eye surgery where the pressure is starting to put a lot of strain on his eyes, so he's going blind. And he realizes that he can't summit because if he summits, he won't be able to see anything, and he'll be putting himself at risk, and other people if he starts to be unable to function. But so he stays at, I think, Camp 3. So it's base camp, Camp 1, Camp 2, Camp 3, and Camp 3 is basically just a landing stage for summiting, or so I understand it. Correct me if I'm wrong, I'm not an expert. When I was a kid, I too was obsessed with Everest, so I read a little bit about it. But he summits. On the way back down, he realizes that he's running out of oxygen, so he tries to get a new tank of oxygen, and that's where things get a little bit sketchy, because his guide firmly believes that there is no fresh canisters of oxygen, even though there's like 8. And so he's like trying to figure it out, and he's like, this is weird that this guy's being really insistent, but whatever. And so he just grabs like one of the cans of oxygen that's very clearly full. What they think is that the guy's mask, the regulator that is keeping him with a fresh supply of oxygen, was frozen because it's so cold that literally like your saliva as you're breathing into your respirator freezes. And so it's like the valve froze, so you can't even properly tell whether or not there's oxygen in a canister by hooking in to one of the canisters, because it won't move because it's frozen. Anyway, I'm not explaining this well. This is why I don't climb, this is why I don't make climbing videos, but I am a fan of Everest. So then he just continues on his way down. He passes the guy at Camp 3 who is like, girl, my eyes aren't working, I can't do it. And he's like, okay, bet, like, you wait for the guide, he'll be able to get you down the hill. I think it's called short roping. There's a way that you can tie in with someone when you're climbing that allows you to basically like drag them with you, so it's like a very direct tether, so that if you're having trouble navigating, if you're having trouble walking, a lot of times Sherpas will do this with customers that are not prepared for climbing the mountain, because they basically get dragged up the hill. It can be very dangerous, especially if someone loses their footing, but in terms of whether it's between like getting someone down the hill or leaving them up there to die, the answer is always like drag them with you. So anyway, the journalist leaves the guy who can't see at Camp 3 and continues down to Camp 2. On the way down, he notices that there's some clouds gathering in the distance. He doesn't think it's that big of a deal. They look really wispy and insubstantial. He's not too worried. So he makes it back down to camp, and he's good. Everything's good. And he's just waiting for other people to come down with him, because he had watched people, like the rest of his party, go up to the summit, and I think the other party, with the other guy who was the competing party, also went up. So there were like, I don't remember, I think it's like 10 people on top. Anyway, a couple of people come back. One guy came down before him. He was a pilot, and apparently he had noticed those clouds, and he had seen them and known that they were the tops of thunder clouds. Because I didn't realize this, but Everest sits at like the cruising altitude of a lot of airplanes, so the way the clouds would have looked is very similar to the way they would have looked in this guy's airplane. So he like could recognize them and was like, that's not looking good, we should leave. Why he didn't try to tell anyone else that, I'm not sure, but there's a lot of things that kind of went wrong in this whole situation. it starts snowing, it got really bad conditions, people couldn't see each other, people thought they were talking to people when they weren't. The guy who was going blind, like, didn't realize that he was talking to the journalist, he thought he was talking to someone else. There's a whole confusion there. Mistaken identity, misrepresenting facts like the oxygen canisters, which also messed some people up. Essentially, this trip is no longer going well. And as he's kind of at camp, listening in, he's realizing people aren't coming back. People are getting lost. People are collapsing. And I can't run through what happens to every single person, but essentially, I don't even know how many people, probably like out of the 10, like at least half died, if not more. It's so hard for me to map out what happened to whom when I'm listening to an audiobook, because I need the physical names, I need a chart. Like, these are the people that went up, this is what happened to this person, this is what happened to this person. But he just keeps hearing these stories and is like horrified because he keeps realizing that people are struggling. But anyway, when he finds out what happens to everyone, and when he gets back, he writes an article very shortly after, because that was the whole point of why he went to Everest. He writes an article being like, this is what happened during the tragedy on Everest that I went to, on the trip that I went on. And he just realizes after that was published that he had misrepresented some facts. He had assumed the way people were reacting to the loss, and people started writing him letters, and it was the letters of the family members of the people that passed away, and he includes them in the book, and he includes his errors, he includes what he should have done better. And while I don't like him, and I think he's incredibly reckless and selfish, I do respect that he was able to take the criticism from both his editor and from the family members, and write it into this book. He also says that he was very heavily impacted by this, as one might imagine, and that he hopes that he'll be able to find something positive to take out of it, because the other survivors did. And he was kind of surprised to see the difference between his reaction and their reaction. And it's not that one is wrong or one is right, but it's just kind of the contrast. This is the first book that I finished in probably like a month, if not more. I don't even remember the last time I finished a book. I know I'm very slow to put out videos, but I've been watching a lot of caving videos and a lot of mountaineering videos, and this book keeps being mentioned by all of them. And so it's just, I thought that it was finally time for me to read it, and I am very glad that I did. I think my next book I might try to read is Into the Wild, which is this journalist's other book. We'll see if I end up reading it, if I finish it, but anyway, yeah, very good book, very tragic, very horrifying. It shows a lot about humanity and kind of humanity in very precarious, difficult situations, especially where it's like every man for himself. Would you help someone? Would you help yourself? Would you leave at all? These are all questions that are very, for me, easy to answer, but maybe not so easy when you're on the mountain about to literally fall off of a cliff. Anyway, let me know if you've read the book, if there's other books you'd recommend I read. I usually don't read autobiographies, I usually don't read nonfiction, but this book was different. Yeah, it was a good read. Anyway, I hope you are enjoying not actively being in danger on a really challenging mountain, or I hope you're not. Anyway, yeah.